Hi, I'm Patrick Dunnican. At Gibbons, we believe that citizens need to be informed about the complex issues that affect their lives. That's why we're proud to support the programming produced by the Caucus Educational Corporation and their partners in public television.
Funding for this edition of Caucus New Jersey has been provided by PSE&G, committed to improving New Jersey's economy and strengthening its communities. NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey. The law firm of Gibbons PC. Johnson & Johnson. Verizon. And by the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, founded by the Jewish community. Promotional support provided by NJ.com. Small news, big news, true Jersey. And by Observer New Jersey Politics.
Welcome to a very special edition of Caucus New Jersey. I'm Steve Adubato. I recently co-hosted a dynamic panel discussion with my colleague Michael Hill, anchor and correspondent at NJTV News, where we looked at the complex and sometimes confrontational relationship between the police and minority community and ways that we can begin to move the discussion forward. Here now is that conversation.
In this next session, we'll look at justice. What does justice look like and to whom? And that's one of the important things about this entire discussion of families of loved ones. What does it look like to them? What does it look like to advocates? What does it look like to police officers? You
know, to that point, Michael, what is so troubling, but it's a reality, as you well know in the reporting you've done for NJTV News, the question of justice and how people perceive it too often, unfortunately, breaks down along racial lines. The prism that people have when they look at justice is colored by race. But the question is, where do we go from here? And this is the part of the discussion where we try to grapple with that question. Let's take a look.
Ms. Valdez, if Zelli is saying he wants justice, and the prosecutor has within his or her realm all of the evidence to take before a grand jury to say whatever, there's the power. And so far, based on what Zelli says, all these police shootings, where's the prosecution? Where's the justice?
I think it's a broader discussion about what people perceive the police role is and what people perceive and judge civilian behavior to be. Because we have presented cases where I'm like, there's a video, there's witnesses, we're going to get an indictment, and then it doesn't come. Not because of any lack of effort on the prosecution part, but because the grand jurors, who are a cross-section of the community, listened to that and decided the police officer was justified. And
Levi, how do you get justice when some of these encounters with the police, someone's being choked and strangled, someone's being shot, someone's being chased, the evidence is there, as the prosecutor said. There it is right there. Everybody can say, okay, it looks like manslaughter, it looks like homicide. The guy was running away. He wasn't after the police officer. So where's the justice? How do you get it?
Well, one situation, like the prosecutor said, one thing that people have to understand is when things go before the grand jury, the perception that the people in the grand jury have of the police are always good guys, regardless of what's going on. And then they have the perception of the person who was assaulted or shot by the police. And in America, if the guy is African-American, then the perception is African-American, he's a bad guy as well. So that is the root of the conversation, and that is the beginning of the lack of justice.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
You know what else doesn't happen, though, in this instance is about the media, right? So when somebody does something, it's all over the news about this person's background. So their information, their background, all the stuff that they did is on the news. That's prior to the grand jury, right? Mm-hmm. But they don't put all of the things that the officer did on. You don't even know the officer's name for the most part. So you don't know that he had 25 other similar situations such as this, or these other things took place, or maybe he smacked a few people before he got to this incident, or something else happened. So you don't know. So it's not a fair situation.
So we contribute to what?
Yeah, you contribute to the kind of narrative of, before they even get to the grand jury, that this guy is a horrible dude and he deserves to die or be shot, you know.
The unconscious bias.
The implicit bias.
So I think what's, I love Michael's example, I think what's most striking about Eric Garner's case is that the only
indictment and ultimately the only conviction that flowed from that was the gentleman who recorded the choking of Eric Garner. And so
He had a cell phone. He had his phone.
And the police, to Mayor Baraka's point, quickly figured out who he was and then trotted out what he had done in the past in terms of criminal behavior. And that, I think, was an intentional attempt to deflect from what was really problematic captured in the video. One, I think that speaks to the way in which blackness in this country, really from the beginning, has been seen as synonymous with dangerous. And so you see this in police interactions with black folks in particular. There is not a moment in which de-escalation is embraced. It's often a quick response which leads to the death of the, unfortunately, often, in the last several years, black person. And the piece of that is that we see this play out and then there is no accountability. So we just have to eat what happens, and it destroys you on the inside because you begin to believe then that the system cannot produce a just result because the prosecutors won't prosecute. And so, although I love Prosecutor Valdez, and she's an exception to the rule, I think that for this reason, outside prosecutors are really important when prosecuting cases.
A special prosecutor.
Police. Right. Certainly not prosecutors in the jurisdiction.
Ms. Davis?
Steve, to your question, what does justice look like for the Gardner family?
We've been both asking that, right?
Yeah, justice for that family is one which looks as if we've never heard his name before, right? Because he's still alive and he's still at home with his children, right? So justice for that family is that these police have not just received the best police training, they've received unconscious bias training. What they've been given is literally the opportunity to understand that individuals who might have height and depth and darkness that is different than their own are not the automatic enemy. And so when we begin to think and talk about the way in which, and forgive me, you know that way before I was in healthcare, I was both a public defender and a prosecutor. And so as I look at where we are now, there's a reason why we have to take a look at the public health crisis that is created when you have communities that do not trust one another, right? Because we treat both the police victim and the policeman when he comes into our trauma center. But we've got to be able to do it in a culturally competent manner that is reflective of the fact that we have taken up the note and understand that we too have to overcome our own implicit bias, our own unconscious bias, that when we first see this person, we create for ourselves our own self-definition. And our one issue is the fact that we continue to have these discussions in some of our homes, but not all of our homes, right? So you're absolutely right. It begins way before they ever fill out an application. It begins in the homes, but I will not be satisfied if only I have to talk to my child, but you do not have to talk to yours about how to interact with mine in a way which celebrates their differences and is reflective of that respect.
It begins also in schools. School culture is a microcosm of our society. I mean, black young men are being suspended 3 times more likely than their white counterparts. I mean, that says something. It says something to what you just said about how we perceive people of color, that there's a danger, an implicit danger, and about our biases, and that we need to have more conversations. You know, we are part of this community, and we need to recognize those biases as real.
We have the honor at Equal Justice USA of piloting a program that brings police officers from the department and community members and the diversity that you talk about into a space to actually talk about these issues, talk about race, policing, and particularly using the frame of trauma, because there's trauma on both sides. And what we find, going back to the perspectives, walking into the room, we hear communities say that they're terrified of the police. The location of this, where these are small groups, 20 to 30 people, talking about some of the deepest issues that this entire country is facing, but especially Newark. And you find people who are deeply wounded on both sides. And officers are traumatized. They have one of the highest suicide rates in this country, 15 to 18%. What's so powerful about these trainings is having community understand and hear the kind of trauma officers are experiencing, and for officers to understand not only the trauma community, the bad days, the challenges of being in a community dealing with domestic violence, dealing with being a gunshot wound victim, but also the historical trauma. Understanding that the history of policing in this country and it's the way in which it has been cahoots with the oppression of Black people in this country has really had a huge impact on how people, when they just see the badge, and when we see officers process that, get it deeply, understand the history, internalize it, and acknowledge it, it goes a tremendous way in having a conversation about race. Because now you're not just talking about theoretical situation, you're talking about interpersonal, you're talking about scenarios, you're talking about actual situations. People actually bring them up in the room.
Yeah, so Reverend Gilmore, here you go. I've got a 64-ton thing here that says, I need a solution. What is it?
Part of it is relationships, right? We have to find ways to foster relationships. And one of the things that we do at our church is that at least once a year, we'll have a Serve Those Who Serve Day, right? So we bring the police officers in, we bring the firefighters in, okay? And we just kind of give them an opportunity to sit down, and we feed them, and we talk to them, and and it's sponsored by our children's ministry. You know, and now I'm understanding that, and I'm seeing that I really need to take that out of my building and put it into the parking lot so that the community can actually come in and begin to build a relationship with the police officer. But this blue wall of silence, right, that happens within the department, I think that, Director Ambrose, I think that you have to do in your department what you're asking the citizens to do. And what you want the citizens to do is tell on one another. Right? When there's a shooting that happens, when there's a crime that happens, right, the word gets out, right? We get on this email chat thing, right, that Ryan has with his neighborhood watch, right? And we begin to say, if you see something, say something, right? Well, we need the officers to do the same thing, because you're right that the racism starts at home and they come in there with it, but the people in your department will see it before anybody else does, and they'll see it before it gets affected on the street. And there has to become some type of mechanism where it's safe in the department to say that somebody can say, I'm a little concerned about this guy, okay? Because we hear the locker room talk, right? And I'm a little concerned about what he's saying. I'm a little concerned about what she's saying, so that we can hopefully catch it before it escalates.
Fatima, I'm going to mention this to you. This is purely hypothetical. You mentioned great results with your program in getting the public to understand the police and vice versa. Hypothetically speaking, if the officers who had confronted Eric Garner had been through your training, what do you think the result would have been?
That's a powerful question. I need to start by saying, though, that you cannot heal the vestiges of slavery in a single program, a single initiative, a single year. And so I want to push back against the notion that there's any single thing. I want to get Eric Garner a job. He shouldn't have been there, right? We have to talk about prevention. This is a much larger issue. So when we get down to nitpicking a single issue, we miss the point. We miss how large this is. It's making sure that police are connected to community-based strategies and solutions so that we are involving young people in their own solutions. I want Eric Gardner to have been on the Civilian Review Board, okay? And had relationships before he was selling Lucy's on the corner. That's the kind of society we're fighting for.
Levi?
No, I just want to say, I'm the president of the Newark Bronze Shields, and in the Newark Bronze Shields, we do exactly that. Yes. All year long, we work diligently to build and maintain a strong relationship with the community. Not only to save the community, but also to educate the police officers as well. Because the more police officers that we can get involved in our programs, the less likely they are to, when they see a tall football player from Shabazz High School, that they will see a big demon and try to attack him.
You mean who happens to be African American? Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? That's what they'll see. So they'll have a relationship with the young people and whoever else that we bring into the fold, and we do this all year long.
Michael, as you know, as the co-moderator of this discussion, no stone was unturned. So the issue of the fact that a very small minority of those who are protesting have called for the violence against police officers, we dealt with it. There are some officers who believe they're being targeted. You've covered this issue, and let's set up this part of the conversation, which was important.
Steve, I think their spot their emotions and feelings are dead on about this, because I've heard people say targeting police officers is okay. Let's take a look.
To touch on as many different areas as possible, we're trying to have an as honest conversation as possible, building trust. When there have been certain rallies where the very small percentage of folks in a rally that are protesting a horrific shooting, an unjustified shooting of usually a black man, where the chant is, what do we want? A dead cop. What do we want? It now. When do we want it now? Or some variation of that. And then there have been incidents where obviously where cops have been targeted. Can I ask this question? Where do we go with those incidents in the spirit of having an honest dialogue? And I'm not saying anything is proportional. I'm saying, what do we do with that? And what do we do with those law enforcement professionals who are feeling like they are targeted right now and they don't know where to turn?
I've never heard anyone say that they want to kill police officers at rallies. I think people who would say that at a rally is a provocateur, is somebody who is there to cause disruption, there to create a larger issue. And I think the vast majority of people at the rally do not believe that.
And for someone to try, you're saying for someone to try to characterize the movement in that way.
Yeah, to characterize it based on some small kind of obscure thing that they had is wrong, right? So that's not what the movement is about.
And when cops are then ultimately murdered, killed, what does it do to this conversation in terms of the need to have an honest dialogue? For some, they'll say, see what? See what?
Well, Steve, the result is that people have turned around in this country and said, Black Lives Matter. You're out there rallying, therefore you're calling for the assassination of these police officers.
Right, which is ridiculous.
And Zelly has never said anything like that, nor have I heard any of his colleagues say that.
Right.
And this is what the trauma looks like. We actually, when we convene these conversations, we talk about this very thing.
How does it sound?
Officers will talk about being out in the field and doing something helpful. There's a mental health issue and someone's acting out and they're waiting with the person for ambulance and someone come off and say, F the police. What are y'all doing here, right? And it really offends them. They feel targeted. They feel like no one really acknowledges the service that they've done in the community. It's really difficult. And we work through, and there'll be people in the room like, yeah, I say, F the police, forgive me. And we work through that dialogue. It's really difficult because what you have to do is acknowledge that the trauma is coming from all the cumulative experiences that are coming to bear in this single incident. The officers that are the best at this, right, are the ones who don't take it personally, recognize that this is coming from all that person's past experience and say, you know what, I understand where that anger is coming from. And you know what, I'm going to be an ally to you in this moment, right? Now, that's hard to ask an officer to do, but when they get it, when they get that, they actually can be better on the job if they take on that perspective. What I've heard officers say is when they operate in that way, the people transform and thank them, say you're different than other cops, they get the positive reinforcement, and that's what motivates them.
I'm sorry, come back to you, Pastor. You just told me the same thing.
Yeah, I said the same thing.
You said it's not personal.
I think there was an event, a protest in Newark that Michael covered. Michael was there.
You were covering it.
Yes.
We're there with our officers, and I heard what the mayor didn't hear. The mayor wasn't there. But I did hear one or maybe even two persons say, they kill us, we have to kill the cops. Because somebody watched your program. Somebody watched on the news that night. And a couple of days later, somebody from our community here in the city of Newark complimented our officers, and myself personally, because I was there with you, and he said, you guys says, how could you sit there and listen to that and hear that and not react? I said, because that's not what we're there to do. We are there to make sure that they have the right to say things like that and to make sure they're protected to do that. I said, you guys are very stoic and you and your officers, and I said, I have to compliment you because you handle it so well, because you do have to kind of listen, let's just let it go, guys.
But one of the things I noticed about the comment, it came from the mother of a guy who had been killed in Bridgeton by the police. And she was still waging war against the police, even though the local police and eventually the Justice Department said the police officers were justified. But one of the things that struck me about her saying that is the audience fell silent when she said that. But you could also hear several people say, yeah, that's right, that's right. And that was disturbing to me.
Why, Mike?
If we have any hope in this country of moving this so far beyond the individual encounters and confrontations and things like that, we have got to deal with these things. You have to end the violence. You have to say life matters. And you can't openly advocate for the assassination, the killing of people. You can't do that. Whether they wear a uniform, don't wear a uniform, it's wrong. Where's the value on life?
I do think it's important to think about the context in which someone would say,
let's kill the police officer.
Right.
And let's be real. As a practical matter, if you're saying that you know that it's not going to end well for you. So in some ways, it's a real act of desperation because you have,
That's
you have
it.
done so much.
That's right.
Right.
You've seen so many black folks in particular
Exactly.
get killed on TV, social media, on your handheld, on your computer, and there's no recourse. There's no accountability. And so as an act of desperation, you want some accountability. So you try to mete it out against a cop, but even doing so, you know that that's not going to end well for you, and that's not going to get what you really want. And so I think to Fatima's point, the context here really matters because when people utter that, they're really saying, I want you to recognize the reality in which I live, which is that too often black lives don't matter.
Yeah, what was disturbing about hearing the mom say that is not so much that the mom would go out and pull the trigger and do it, is that who was she inciting to do it? Who in that crowd would take up a weapon and say, okay, I'll do it?
Part of what is so disturbing and divisive when we start talking about Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, it's tough to hear that because to your point, Michael, people are dying. And so we have opportunities to talk about that. And I know that initially, when you talk about Black Lives Matter, especially among law enforcement, some of the knee-jerk reactions are, well, it only matters when there's a police officer involved. What's happening with all the other violence? They're not front and center with those, with all of the shootings that we have that don't involve. So, but that is the perception.
Right.
And so, and when you talk about Blue Lives Matter, you choose to be a police officer. People don't choose to be African American or choose to be brown. So it gives us a baseline from which to start the discussion. And it's hard. I can tell you that as brown as I am, as Dominican as I am, as Newark as I am, when I walk into a setting and it's the first time that I'm there, I'm not necessarily welcomed as a person of color because they associate me as a law enforcement official. You're covering for them. You're not really one of us.
No matter what you say, no matter
what I
no matter
say.
what your track record
and
is.
it is hard work to sit there and talk to families that are grieving, that are angry. They have all of this displaced anger, and it's directed towards me. And I gotta tell you, there's many a time, and Micheline and I talk about this all the time, as tough as I am, as gritty as I am, where I have to sit and take a deep breath and just let the tears flow, because I'm in this work every day. I got my nose in it every day. But because I'm the chief law enforcement official, I got to break through and bridge to communities that I'm trying to serve. And it ain't easy.
Mr. Holmes, what would you say to the prosecutor right now?
As an active duty police officer, because I'm still a sergeant in the police department, that is a situation that we deal with on a regular basis. You do feel that way, and especially as the Bronze Shields, when we go out into the community, we have to win people over and get them to understand that, yes, policing is what we do, but we're still here. You're building bridges. We're still African-American police officers, still here to support you. We're still one, and it's very difficult at times. As a rookie police officer, I was down in the East District for my first few years. Everyone loved the police. They loved the police, everything. I had to work the festival in Bergen Street one day, and I walked up to a little boy, and I said, hey, little boy, how you doing? And the father said, don't you speak to that black MFer ever again in your life. He snatched the boy away from me. I was hurt. And that's a situation that you have to deal with. Now, at first, instantaneously, I was angry at that father, but I understood.
That's right.
I understood that there was some other trauma in his past that made him anti-police. So I composed myself, I got over it, and I continued with my day. But thank God I understood that. And growing up in the city of Newark, I was not a fan of the police growing up. I was not a fan of the police because the police, I was always a really tall guy amongst many people. So the police always singled me out. And I was never a criminal, I was never shooting dice, I was never doing anything like that. One day, an off-duty police officer working at the old A&P on Clinton Avenue, he saw me, he talked to me, and he asked me, why don't I become a police officer? We became involved in different conversations, and I explained to him my animosity. And he said to me, if you have such an issue with the police, you need to come on this job and make a difference. And I did that, and I'm here with the Bronze Shields, and we're doing it.
What does that tell you, Mr. Mayor, and how often do you hear African-American and or Latino men and or women saying, I want to be a part of this?
Well, obviously, there's a lot of people that want to be on the police department because the numbers show that, right? So there's a lot of people taking the test. They want to become police officers. I mean, it's still a job that people respect. I mean, whether they have issues or whatever with the police department, when something something goes wrong, everybody dials 911. It's just, and I say that to everybody, right? So at the end of the day, that's what happens. I mean, and we're really talking about humanity, right? And I don't think we get to that. You can't train people to be human, right? You know, or have respect for humanity. And then the question is, there's some people, in some people's eyes, you know, some folks are less human than others. And you know, the cultural institutions, the media, schools, church, kind of defines for us who is to be respected, who's not to be respected, who's more human than others, who's closer to God even than other people. And we make these judgments every single day, whether it's a split-second decision or not. I mean, in my mind, if it was a white kid in a certain area selling Lucy's, I don't think he would have ended in a chokehold. I just don't believe it. Just like the kid with the toy gun in Cleveland got shot because he had a toy gun. I just don't believe young white kids with toy guns are going to get murdered on the street. I just don't see that happening because our view of them are different. It's just what humanity is about. And when you become a police officer, people in the community think about it like you're taking up for people who are abusing me. And so you have to prove yourself otherwise.
Even in Newark?
Everywhere. You got to prove it. And I think you should. I think you should have to prove that you're different than what people are saying and feeling, because it actually helps the department. It helps the system when you prove to people that you're not like everybody else, that you're actually different, and that it actually means that some of the stuff can be salvaged. Because when they see that nothing is different, then in their mind they think it cannot be salvaged. And so you get people to say crazy things like that.
The preceding program has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of Caucus New Jersey has been provided by PSE&G, NJIT, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, the law firm of Gibbons PC, Johnson & Johnson, Verizon, and by the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey.
I work for Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I'm a catastrophic case manager. I'm a nurse. I feel a sense of responsibility to each and every member that I speak with on the phone. I know where they live, I know their towns, I know the hospitals they go to. A lot of times I know their physicians, and I love helping people at very difficult times of their lives. The job I have now is the perfect job for me. I think I was born a nurse.